Mark,
Yes, sir.
thank you for doing this.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
So tell us who you are
Okay.
and tell us what you get to do for work.
So that's a great way to put it. My name is Marc Kantor. I'm an interventionist by training, and I work with J. Flowers Health Institute, which is based in Houston, Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about your history, because we've known each other for a couple of years, and I know you've done a few things, and you've landed with J. Flowers Health Institute. But where have you been?
Well, I've been around the block, but to go way, way back, not back to the dinosaurs, but back.
Sure.
I was in commercial real estate for a long time before finding a career in behavioral health, and I was burnt out in that field. I moved to Florida kind of on a whim with my wife and daughter, and it was a geographic. I knew it was a geographic coming to Florida, and I didn't know what to do, and I hadn't yet discovered this, and I fell into a spiritual crisis, and I found myself at the gym one day, standing in the shower with the water running over me, saying, well, I can't drink, I can't have an affair, and I can't kill myself. Those are the rules. Now go figure out what's next in your life. And a few years before that, I had participated in an intervention with for a friend of mine in Washington, D.C. And
Like you were a part of the support group.
Yeah. And I liked it. It was actually Sam Davis, who's well-known and well-respected interventionist, did the intervention. And I really liked it. I really liked the process and be part of it, and it felt like it a meeting. And I started taking the classes or getting the certificate or whatever it is we get to become an interventionist. But I never did anything with it because, fear. There's always that, I want to do this, but fear. And so I never did anything with it. And then I forgot about it. So I'm in Florida. I'm going through this spiritual crisis. My relationship with my wife at that point was feeling very rocky. I was feeling very tentative about myself. And it was like the equivalent of a snow day in Florida. It was a rainy, cold day. And my daughter and I are having dinner. We're sitting in the kitchen. And she looks at me out of the blue. She says, Dad, why don't you start doing interventions? And it hit me. And I said, oh my God, yeah. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And like at that moment, I just started kind of developing the concept of what my intervention business would look like. And I had good skills from commercial real estate, managing expectations, managing people, details, organization, things like that were important skills in the intervention field. So it was kind of a natural fit for me, but I didn't know anybody and I didn't know anything. And I just started talking to people. I would meet whoever there was. And I was seeing a therapist at the time, and he knew one guy. And I don't even remember who that one guy is anymore. And he had a treatment center and a shopping center in Florida, which is like,
right,
kind of the worst case scenario, right, in our business. And he said, do you know so-and-so? And I would find things, and I went to one thing, and I met a guy there, and he said, oh, do you know these three people? And I said, no. He said, call them, use my name, here's their numbers. And I did, and I didn't ask questions. And I think that bottom line, I was willing to do whatever it was going to take to be successful, because I'd been someone who, throughout my addiction and in my life, really struggled with my career and, do I want to be here? What am I doing? And I was always ambitious and always hardworking, but didn't necessarily feel like I had that fire or that true desire. And I realized that this was an opportunity for me to do something that would give me purpose and meaning, but was also, this was my idea. This was my thing. And I really loved it. And it just started to grow,
So tell a family who's never heard of an intervention outside of the TV show, maybe.
Right.
What is an intervention?
So good question. So an intervention is an organized or a choreographed meeting or conversation But what an intervention really does, to give you the behind the scenes, is for me, I do a 2-day intervention piece process. And day one is really about the family. Everyone who's going to participate in the intervention is at that first meeting. I call it the intervention before the intervention, except for the person we want to get into treatment. And really what we're doing is we're training that family. And sometimes people will ask me, so what's involved in an intervention? And I'll ask them, I'll say, have you ever had a dog? And they'll say, yes, of course. And I said, well, do you ever hire a dog trainer? And I said, yeah. And I'll say, well, that dog trainer is not really training the dog, are they? And they're like, no, I guess not. And it's a similar thing. It's where I'm working with the family to change their environment. If I've done everything correctly, on day one, I should be doing very little on day two. I should just kind of be orchestrating or pointing or, interjecting here and there, because it's about the environmental change. But it's also, I look at it like this. Everything we do that day is meant to foster a positive result. We meet early in the morning because we know that we know where the individual is most of the time. They haven't started drinking or using that day. It kind of gives us the like a little bit of an upper hand, just a little bit more advantage. And we the way we sit, the way we de-escalate, the way we go around the room, the words we use. Sometimes, for example, I'll have, and I see this with sons and fathers, where the minute the father opens his mouth, the son is, he's reacting to it.
Right.
That's where the trauma is. He's reacting to it. So sometimes we'll have the father just say, you limit it to saying, son, I love you and I want you to be happy, and then that's it. Don't give him anything to grab onto. And most interventions, most of the time, are successful. Every once in a while, we'll get into an intervention. We're going into it, I'll say to the family, I feel like the likelihood of success, at least tomorrow, is not that high. But every once in a while, I get surprised. So
yeah.
I
like the way you said sort of change the environment. I think often, even for a person in recovery, there's all the focus on the person that has an addiction. What can we do to support them so that they can make the right decision? And I like the systems approach to actually, if we change the temperature in the room, or that decision will organically develop without having to yell, scream, throw a fit,
carry on like a maniac.
Right.
Yeah.
You better do this, or, and interventions are powerful tools for change, or at least the first step of change.
No, there's no question. But I think you're right. The environment has to change. And one of the things I always say is that addiction in the family is like the elements of fire. There's spark, fuel, and oxygen. The spark is the disease, the fuel is the drug, and the oxygen is the family. But you remove one of those elements and you have no fire. So the element we can control is the family. Usually when I get someone to treatment, that day always goes well. We do the intervention, we get them in the car, we get them going. And I'm kind of the easier, softer way. I like to think, we're going to stop at Starbucks, we're going to eat, we're going to, as long as they're moving in the forward direction, to accommodate them and keep them moving and get them into treatment. But typically what happens is they don't really want to work with me after they're in treatment anyway. They start to get educated. They start to get influenced by other people in treatment. They start pulling ROIs, the release of information, exerting their power, things like that, the games they play. So I feel like, once your son, daughter, mother, father is in treatment, that's great. And they've got a team around them, and let them work with that team. Our focus is on the family. Let's continue to work with the family. And a lot of times that's stopping the family from rescuing the individual. You get all kinds of calls like, he called me and he said he hasn't had a good steak dinner in 3 weeks, and
Right.
things like that. We've stopped a lot of families from rescuing their kids from going to get them. So yeah, it's a big part of it.
This is another interesting question just that I think about in terms of your life, especially previous to Jay Flowers and maybe connected to it as well today. But how does somebody know that they found a good treatment center? What do you look for?
That's a great question. For me, one of the big items that will cause us to continue to work with a treatment center or not work with a treatment center again is level of communication. It's the number one complaint we get from families. My son's been there for 2 days and I haven't heard from anybody. And while the treatment team has 30 or 40 people that they're talking to, working with, that family's focused on one person.
Right.
And so every minute for them is a big deal. And I think that level of communication with us, with them, is really important. I look for treatment centers that I can get a member of the leadership team on the phone on Friday night if something's going on. I often feel like that if I visit a treatment center and I leave feeling like, wow, I really want to be a part of that. That's special. That culture is special. That's a big thing for me. And that's one thing that Jay Flowers does in particularly well. They do a lot of things in particularly well. This is what really is their culture. And that's what sets them apart. There's, can other people do assessments? Sure. But the other treatment centers do it the way Jay Flowers does? No. They go deep. Their assessments are renowned, but it's their culture. And that's the feedback I get. That's the feeling I have being there. So
tell us about your gig. Tell us about what you do at Jay Flowers.
So I'm on the business development team, but really what I do, and I think this is what I've always done, is I'm a relationship manager, right. Or I'm just out building relationships. I'm out sharing my story, being a resource to people. And that's the difference between what we do, the good people in our business do compared to in commercial real estate or Wall Street or anything. It's definitely we're an ecosystem. Our Cumberland, Flowers, Cirque, all these treatments. So it's like we're all connected. Where does this client belong? Where will they flourish? And that's our job, is to just continuously be a smart resource. I mean, the best way to build rapport with any prospective client or any family is to have that very consultative, very investigative approach. You're asking them a lot of questions. You're not pitching them on anything. You're investigating understanding their situation.
Yeah. One of the things that I like about a group of providers in our business, in terms of addiction treatment, primary, or even mental health, are the providers that go above and beyond to find that client a home, even if that home isn't Cumberland or Cirque, like you mentioned, or Flowers,
right.
Through relationships,
right,
through the ecosystem, and
right.
saying, somebody on, our development team being able to call you and say, listen, I have this case and we think that there's really more of a mental health primary, this, that, or the other. There might be a health issue, undercurrent of all of that. We might think that one of the assessments at Jay Flowers Health Institute might be best, and really trying to find, what is being of service to the community.
Right. I absolutely agree. Yeah. Well, I always say, have them call me, and if I'm not the right person, I'll get them to the right person.
And then outcomes speak for themselves.
Correct.
Because that's how you build trust in the community.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not, I would say this about Cumberland Heights or Flowers, or, it's not about that organization. It's about the people that make it up in that organization. And
absolutely.
Like a family is going to call you because they have a relationship with you.
Right.
That's what I mean. Not the other way around.
I agree. They know you. They don't know the organization.
where you are today.
Right.
You know, they might have called you 10 years ago.
Right.
You know, and they say, you know what? No, we need to call Mark because I bet he'll have an opinion. He'll have some good early direction that we might be able to follow, you know, for real, you know, because it's a big environment being at an event like this and seeing all the different providers that are represented, but it's really small. It's really a very small community.
It's funny because I'll meet somebody and I'll tell them what they do, and sometimes they'll say, well, I didn't know that there was such a job like that. Or, you know, I didn't know that existed.
Right.
It's not, it's like if you ask somebody for a referral for a real estate agent, well, everybody knows somebody, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And I used to get that in commercial real estate. I'd be somewhere and they would be someone who's a business owner and I would think, oh, good, you know, maybe they're a prospect, and they would say, oh, my best friend from college and it was always another real estate broker that I knew, and I was like, okay, great, I get it. I'm not getting your business, but yeah, people don't. The mental health field is really big. It's really deep. A lot of these organizations are now institutionally owned. And they spend a tremendous amount of money marketing themselves and looking like the perfect place. And it is not unheard of for some organizations to be spending $1 million a month on marketing, on Google ads and all these things. And yeah, so they will seem like we are the best fit. Yes, we do that. They'll say yes to everything. We do that. We're the perfect place. We're everything.
So if you had a recommendation for a family, you know, and that the only tool they have right now is Google, what should they look for? Because you're right. You know, there's a lot of. It's easy to make a website look really great.
Right.
So how do you, like, if you had a suggestion, 2 or 3, like, what could you do to peel that layer back if you just have somebody making a cursory search through the web?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, you can't go by Google reviews, right? Because those aren't accurate. I learned that early on. I tell families, don't read Google reviews. You know, these are people that have
either really happy or really disenchanted.
Yeah. And the common denominator is, let's be honest, they're often people with an unresolved mental health issue.
Can be.
Yeah,
it can be.
And have resentments, and so it's hard to filter that way. I mean, I would say one is, you know, I would look.
It's also hard to like comment because you can't. Like as a provider, you know, you can't comment about the details of what there's never. If you're ever wondering why there's not another side of the story, it's because there are privacy laws that prohibit an ability for a provider to say, well, actually, this, and this happened, you know?
Yeah.
Right. So,
and you can only provide very generic responses like, you know, we always do our best
which feels soulless.
It does.
I get it. Like, I'm like, it's unlike a restaurant where the restaurant's like, we'll come back in and we'll give you a free dinner, you know, or whatever, right? You know,
we'll come in, the lobster's on us.
It really just feels like a lot of that is hanging out in the wind, and there are laws protecting an ability to communicate that way. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, no, and I think that's exactly why someone like myself or you is the route, because when we recommend something, we're talking from personal experience. We've had families that have already been there and have done very well. We've been through the process with them. We know the staff. We like them. We trust them. So that's huge. Before I was in this business, we sent my daughter to treatment, and but she was 14. She was having mental health issues, and
was it mental health primary or addiction?
It was mental. She was smoking pot, which was causing a lot of it.
Right.
And we sent her, and you know, I look back at how we handled that.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I wish I knew me then. Because I would have said,
how did you find the place that she went?
Someone we knew recommended it, but I didn't realize the whole, you know, I knew going into it that, so they didn't take our insurance, which was one. 2 is, you know, it was expensive. It was $30,000 for the month, which we didn't readily have available, but had to get to. And I remember calling the the clinical director, and she called me back. And I acknowledge, as someone in recovery in the 12 steps and having been through the process, but not knowing the field. And I was talking, and she said, and you want to know if this is going to work. And I said, yeah. And she said, I can't tell you that. I don't know. And the truth is, I knew that in of itself, it would not work. Like, it would not, this was not the answer. Especially because with such a young person too, when I got sober, I was 32. I had a 2-year-old child at home. I had a wife that was leaving me. I was a homeowner. So I had these things that if you don't do this, you're going to lose these things. So there was a lot of motivation. I'd also been in a lot of emotional pain my whole life and knew something had to change. I knew I couldn't continue this way. So, did it work? I don't know. I don't know if there was a piece in her that worked. Eventually, what worked a couple of years later was she got some bad marijuana and was having an episode and literally said, take me to the psych ward. I mean, checked herself in, came out and was like, I'm not doing that again. And it was pretty much done. And then she just matured out of it. But I always tell my wife, we got lucky.
Anomaly.
We got lucky. We got lucky.
That's exactly my reaction.
Yeah. It could have been. I think she had years of watching me. She heard the story. She knew that this goes nowhere. She's very smart. But we got lucky,
Yeah.
It's just,
especially it sounds like that was a few years after she was 14, but she was still certainly a young adult. Mm-hmm. But adolescent care, there are different models.
Yeah.
There's a distinct difference between adolescent care because of where somebody is developmentally and an adult.
Yeah.
Also because sometimes where they are developmentally, but those are two different life trajectories, and you have to really handle that with care in terms of the programs you select. And are there people that you can see? That's something I always look for, like faces of real people that work there.
Well, yeah, and so going back to the Google is the only tool question. One of the first things I look at is who's on the team.
Right.
And if they don't have actual people, or they just say our team is the best, but there's no people there with no bias, forget it. That's bad news right away. Right. I think, how long have they been in business? And have a conversation with them. Certainly nobody would know to ask these questions, but one question I might ask is, how many calls do you guys get a day?
That's a good one.
And if they say we get 1,200 calls a day, well, they're not your personal provider.
Right.
Right. I can tell you Jay Flowers probably gets 5 or 6 calls a day. Maybe a few more, I don't know, but not 1,200.
Right.
And if they have a call center, I've seen some of these call centers. I know you have 2 where they have big screens on the wall. It's like air traffic control. So that's probably not your best provider. With that said, I want to say that there are people that come to. I have people that come to me that have their own airplanes, and I have people that come to me and say, we have the insurance, and that's it, and we need to use our benefits. And I don't begrudge that at all. I think I get that. And there's a place for everybody. And somewhere is better than nowhere. Places that are insurance dependent or take insurance or have a larger volume business are not necessarily bad places. You just need to be comfortable with it.
Yeah. And,
if you're a family that's, just out there in the dark trying to save your kid, there is, sometimes the only tool you have is prayer. Is prayer. And there is no prayer like the one you say when you're scared for your kid. That is a whole other. It is way different than your spouse being out there or a sibling. When it's your child, it is a different level of prayer. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, we are very grateful that you would do this.
Thank you. This was great. This was a great little.
I know.
moment.
Every time somebody's come in, they were like, "Oh, this is We thought it was something else. So we tried to bring a little Nashville with us, you know,
Yeah.
and just make it comfortable and take advantage of being in the same space and place with so many of our friends across the country.
Yeah.
We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I'm
know?
glad to be here in
And
Cumberland.
travel safe. Where are you going?
Where we live here in Florida,
Okay.
so we're going to. I think we'll be okay.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of a hurricane denier. Like, well, let's see what happens. My wife is on the thing every 5 minutes. Well, now it's this and now it's that.
Yeah.
So she freaks out for the both of us. So I don't have to. So.
Yeah, she'll send you updates and she'll let you know. So, but
Yeah.
I hope everybody's safe, and especially where we are in Middle Florida. Is that it?
Yeah, Central Florida.
Central Florida.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I hope so too.
we're gonna travel safe back to Nashville. But we appreciate you. We're gonna, of course, tag Mark and information about the J Flowers Health Institute in today's episode. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you again next time.
Thank you very much.